Hey there, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to another episode of the True Discussion Podcast. It's the only podcast in the world, where we can discuss anything with anyone, and we know it's true or not, because we stand on, what is it? What are we going to stand on?
The sweet Word of God.
Amen, brother. We are still your hosts. My name is Joseph
Michelle
Dobbs. Nope. No. Okay. And I'm joined by the, what do they call you these days, my guy?
Christopher Douglas.
So we are excited for this guest. No, we're excited for this guest. Come on.
Oh, yes. We have a special guest today.
We do on today's episode. His name is Clifton Couch. Boy, oh boy, is this a good episode. It's the topic at hand is truth.
Yeah.
Okay? So for you guys who want to geek out and talk about a concept, the entire episode is truth. Mm-hmm. And why does it matter? And we go into a little bit of situations where, what does that look like when we don't live by truth? Mm-hmm. What does that society look like? Right. Spoiler alert, we're kind of there.
Right, yeah. Cliff wrote an article on his blog website, and he's written many, but this one is titled Why Truth Matters. And so in the episode, we dig into why truth matters and what are the implications, in society as individuals and ultimately like in the church when we compromise on that and what should we do about standing on truth. So it was very good.
Truth kind of matters. So just give you a quick introduction to Cliff. He graduated, with a Master's of Public Administration from Florida State University. Yes. Served in the Marine Corps. How long was he? You said he was in
law enforcement for nearly 20 years. So at different capacities. He has a very, just a solid resume for sure, but all of that is equated to just a great experience. And so this episode really is good.
Yep.
So.
Is now an instructor in criminal justice in Athens, Tennessee. Yeah. So it's just funny, man. We're going to get into it. I don't want to give it away, but truth matters. Spoiler alert.
Absolutely.
So please enjoy. So we'll just kick it off. So Cliff, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and talking to a couple knuckleheads like us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We've got a little bit of a time difference. I forgot you guys are actually 2 hours behind me and not one. I came from Great Bend before I came here, so I'd got used to just the 1 hour. So just bear with me if I pass out here.
Yeah.
What time do you get up? Usually in the morning.
Normally about 4:45.
I was guessing in the 4s for sure. You probably got to get that PT in, right?
Yeah, gotta keep moving when you get my age.
Now, are you early 40s, late 30s? Where are you at?
Yeah, man, I've been out of Goodland for a while, so I'll turn 42 next month. Okay. Time flies.
Yeah, man, it's been a little
Things
bit.
start hurting.
Yeah. Oh, well, I guess. Hey, man, we'll get right into it. One of the reasons that we wanted to have you on is because you obviously have a wealth of knowledge and different things that are really interesting. But I had recently read an article that you wrote, and man, I really enjoyed it. And it's something that I shared and for the listeners, I have not shared it yet on our site because I knew this was in the works as far as interviewing you. So I didn't want to share it too soon. But we will link it in the podcast episode.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We'll put it on our website when after that's done as well. So,
Great.
But man, why truth matters? This is good. I do want to ask you, why did you write that? What motivated you to write this?
Well, I think it's maybe a better question would be, why does it matter so much now? And I think any of us that kind of have our eyes open and looking at society around us can see that there's a very distinct change that's going on to where we can't agree on even basic things that are obvious common truths. But it's really more than that. What I've watched just in my time as an adult is kind of the idea of relativism, which is to me really just another way of saying there is no truth.
Right.
Is what you're saying when you say relativism. And the problem with that are the things that I just felt like I needed to write that article about. you're just completely wandering. I mean, what is the meaning to anything if
Right.
there is no absolute
Right.
truth?
Yeah. And you did. There's a couple times in your article where you wrote about absolute truth, and that's one of the questions that I wanted to get to in a bit. But it's right here. So, how do you define absolute truth? Would be my first question, and then the second follow up to that is how might you? Well, actually, let me have you answer that, and then I'll ask my follow up. Sorry, gosh darn it.
I guess I would just define absolute truth as just that there is one true thing. There's you can't have multiple things be true at one time. Something can't be black and white at the same time.
Well,
There's only one absolute truth. The way I define that is the way that it's found in the scriptures
mhm.
is what I think that we have to turn to for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just because I do like to press on the definition of truth. Cliff, I got students that some are Christian, some are not, and so I enjoy discussion with all of them. But I really enjoy discussion with a non-believer when they claim there is no truth. I've had students claim that, which is funny because you're a student. I mean, aren't you in the pursuit of truth? I mean, it's just it's
Right.
funny. But anyhow, the definition of truth comes up, and so when you get someone who does finally acknowledge truth, the dictionary definition is that which corresponds to reality, and I'm okay with that. Except I want to go one step further because reality, because of the times we're in, can be subjective. Whose reality? Yours, mine, Chris's.
Mhm.
What if I'm high on drugs? Then my reality has changed. So I do like to take it one step further and say that which corresponds to the mind of God. If God's mind declares 2 + 2 is 4, that's the reality. I guess.
So I mean, there is no truth is a really convenient maxim if you're a student,
Right.
especially if you're about to take a test, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no standard.
And I think that's why it's so easy to go down that path because, like I talked about in the article, as humans, we're really kind of wired to take the path of least resistance. Absent something outside of us, some outside influence, we're gonna follow our own self-interest, and that's really what that kind of idea of there not being any such thing as truth does. It's a very convenient thing, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting
Yeah.
because, and not just my students, but anyone that I've had that discussion with, when pressed upon it, the folly is quickly revealed. If you proclaim there's no truth, you don't live that way in any capacity. Anyhow, so it's kind of self-defeating. So, Chris, what was your?
Well, it's very self-defeating. There was Johnny Diaz wrote a song a while back that had a line that's just stuck with me for years, and it says something to the effect of, "They say there's no absolutes, but are they absolutely sure?"
Right.
So it's a philosophically inconsistent position as well.
Yeah, to say there's no truth is a truth statement. It makes no sense.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I wish I could go back a little bit because my second question you answered in the first, and I anticipated that you would, but my question was going to be, how can you define absolute truth without God? And of course, you answered my question already, so that I just wasted even more of your time. So, but I really, really did appreciate your article, and one of the things that, like, even in the second paragraph there. I mean, you define truth, but then you talk about how without it, the ships of our lives cannot be steered toward anything reasonable or resembling usefulness. Without that reference point, we're doomed to blindly wander in the wild oceanic expanse of our existence. Truth is vitally important, right? And like Joseph had talked about, no one lives in the absence of truth. However, why is it that we do conveniently want to reject truth even for our own experience? And you wrote about that as well, because we want our cake and to eat it too. But why is that?
Well, I think we're wired as human beings. We're naturally sinful, so there's always going to be a tendency again to follow our own self-interest. Sometimes, that can be kind of harnessed for a good thing. That's kind of what capitalism tends to do. But by and by, I mean, bottom line is we typically don't act outside our self-interest. Even when it looks like we are, if you really hammer it down and drill down into the situation, you normally find that there was some reason that we really had a self-interest in our motive. So that's just what we're always going to do. And that's why, if you give up that hill, this idea that there is an absolute truth, then anything is possible after that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to use that anything is possible for anything beneficial. It's going to be for something self-interested. And that's kind of what I talked about in the article. So, we want to have our cake and eat it too. Back during the sexual revolution and all of that, I'm sure that a lot of people were probably thinking something along the lines of, well, we know that traditional morals say that, something that monogamy is the rule. And we can see now, because we're getting smarter, we've got our science and all, we see that maybe that was, and I'm sure they probably, didn't talk about God or religion. They probably ascribed it to cultural mores or whatever. But now we're smarter. We've advanced as society, and we realize that yes, that did help prevent diseases and things like that, and it did have some value as sort of establishing families and that sort of thing. But we're smarter than that. So there's a hubris that goes with it as well. And then so through the use of contraceptives or through whatever, we can get by. So again, we can have our cake and eat it too.
Right.
I think an argument I made in the paper was about the economy. These things are rooted in real things, in the real way the world works, but we'll just go in and we'll tweak it a little bit. So we'll have our cake and we'll eat it too. And there's just a really interesting human tendency to try and do that, I think.
Yeah. Now, you've spent nearly 2 decades in law enforcement. How has that experience shaped your understanding and obviously appreciation for absolute truth?
Oh gosh, a lot of ways. I'll tell you one thing for me is that it is such a messy world, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really convenient to think of the world in terms of good guys and bad guys. Like that's why we like Lord of the Rings was such a huge thing.
Right.
I think at least part of that reason was because you knew who the bad guys were. Nobody felt bad about somebody chopping the head off of an ugly orc that was trying to kill people.
Sure.
The real world's not like that.
Right.
So even the quote unquote bad guys that I would deal with sometimes out there, you would see that these were human beings, that they were in need of the savior, and that a lot of them didn't have the benefits of maybe the upbringing that I did, and you get into all these just moral quandaries of
right.
What is the right and the wrong in this situation? At the end of the day, you just had to be able to come back to a place of there's an almighty God that knows. And he knows what the ultimate right and the ultimate wrong was and all that. It's the only real answer to all that messiness.
So then do you defer to this is the law, and so then it's not personal? Or because it almost sounds like then you're not saying truth becomes relative in those situations, but you're saying that it is a little mucky. So then do you just defer to this is the law and we enforce the law? We're not the judge in terms of making those decisions. And that's why you referred to God, I assume, or?
Yeah, there's kind of several different layers to it. Mm-hmm. So, what I would find myself lately, the last few years doing, maybe I'm just getting soft, but a lot of times it would be, hey, you broke the law, you're going to jail tonight, but that doesn't mean that I have to treat you like the dregs of humanity.
Sure.
let me make sure that I put you in contact with someone if you really want help about breaking this addiction you have. And this is, I'm going to leave this number with, so I think you can try and do both. So there has to be justice. And that's what, you're referring to, following the law, and not just justice, but that's we could have a whole hour-long conversation about just what that is too, but I'm sure, but the law has to be enforced. People have to do their job, but at the same time, you can still treat people with a certain dignity.
Absolutely. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Have you, I'm sure that growing up as a kid, you saw Karate Kid, like the movies.
Which
were
one?
you a fan?
1, 2, 3.
Okay. So have you seen the Cobra Kai? Have you seen that?
I watched a couple of them. Yeah.
Okay. So, and that's instantly what I thought of when you were talking about like how like it is murky, and how like in the Lord of the Rings it's absolute. There's good guys and bad guys. But if you've watched Cobra Kai, even the first season, I don't know if you watched it all, but it was written in such a way where it's like, man, Johnny, like he wasn't a bad dude. He kind of grew up they wrote it in a way where it's like he kind of grew up in a not a great situation. And by the end of the first season, you're kind of rooting for the guy. Where in Karate Kid, you're like, this guy's a dirtbag, And so it's almost, is there a difference between like a perceived truth and absolute truth?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely there is. And I don't even know if any of the three of us can really. We hopefully are coming close to it if we're using the Word of God as the source of it, along with logic and reason, but honest reason. But I'm sure there's some stuff that we're all off on too.
Sure.
So that would be, I guess, our perceived truth, and then there's only one absolute truth. The rest of us have it wrong.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just for the listeners, because I don't want them to think that, when we say terms like perceived truth, that therefore there are multiple truths. There's not. There is one objective truth. Anything else, you could throw any label on anything else, and it's not the truth. So our perceived truth, sometimes it could be the objective truth, sometimes not. And so I like what you said there, kind of going back to the second paragraph in your article. Talking about the ships of our lives could be steered toward anything if we weren't rooted. And you end it by saying we need something objective, unchangeable. That's the truth. And so in those murky scenarios, just because we, and with our fallible minds, cannot always perceive the truth, doesn't mean that there isn't objectivable truth.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's only, and, if you've, when I was in the military, we went to this jungle warfare school, and you had to do land nav, right? And it's in Okinawa, it's thick jungle, and if you could see something, that's why people climb trees in the movies when they get lost, because you want to find like a mountaintop or something to walk to. You don't know what you're going towards. If you're in a dark room, if you don't have that reference point, at some point you're just completely lost. You may try counting your steps. I remember the wall was 4 feet back, but eventually you're just completely lost. That's really how any of us are, without that reference point of what's true. And, again, as we all search for it, we may not have it exactly right. We need to keep an open mind, but we have to do so with the understanding that there is that reference point. And even if we're all a little bit off on it, somewhere that exists.
Sure. And I will get into like theology and doctrine, because I feel like that ultimately that's, what I believe you're talking about. But I wanted to get back to a line in your article. It's under the clause cat, the marriage. I'm telling you, man, I thought it was excellent, but it's the last paragraph or last sentence in there. In the same way, we've made a habit of using vaunted science and cutting edge thinking to attempt to get the good things out of life, while avoiding the responsibilities and hassles that truth dictates come with them. man, that's good stuff, right? We
Yeah, I
abuse
hope so.
that. I mean, science. So one of the things I thought about is like steroids, right? Like the truth is that we are limited to some degree, but then we use this science to cut corners, to cheat, right? And that
Yeah,
is a detriment to society, is it not?
yeah, and I think that. So look, I'm not like I've got a cell phone. I've smartwatch. I'm not that guy. I'm not anti-technology,
Hmm.
but there is a sense in which I think we do have to be careful that as humanity, we do like to use science to replace God whenever we can.
Hmm.
I mean that's we're constantly trying to use it to look for an alternative explanation to God, so that, and again, I think we're hardwired to seek our own self-interest, and that is self-interest, because if I can convince myself there's no God, if I can get away from that reality, then life could probably be a lot more fun, at least initially. We
Right.
all know where sin leads eventually, but um, yeah, there's a hubris to it as well, I think.
Well, and the
Mm.
reality that, or not, it's not reality, but it's interesting that, and you guys have already touched on this a little bit, but it's interesting that society would say there is no absolute truth, and yet, well, why? How is there law then? And how is
Yeah,
that not?
Right.
I mean, just kind of thrown out the window. I mean, if my
yeah,
truth allows me to do X, Y,
Yep.
Z, why should I be penalized as a criminal
Yeah.
for that?
right. So I know that's not what we're talking about today, but something I've been doing a lot of. Chris and I caught up a little bit this afternoon, and I, uh, I've been a police chief for about the last decade, and I was actually, I'm not anymore. I was recently fired. I had to report my boss to the district attorney and the city council, and he took exception to that and fired me about a week before the hearing with the council.
Oh
So,
gosh.
and I talk about, in the article, our obligations to truth, but what that's led to is me doing a lot of thinking and studying about, can you really be a Christian and work in government? Like, and what is the role of and that interplay between, because I definitely don't want a theocracy, or
Mhm.
I think that that can go wrong too. So what is that balance there? But I don't know what the answer is. But one thing I do know is you can't have a truly secular government. I think you can have a separation between church and state. That's probably a good thing, but you can't have a separation between God and state,
Mm.
Mhm.
because of what you just said, Chris. It's got to come into play sometime, right? Because
Yeah.
if there is no absolute truth, if there is no deeper source of right and wrong, then who are any of us to tell someone else not to murder someone? Why?
Right.
Well, then it is
Explain to
out
me
of
why. Give me a
convenience,
good
right?
Yeah.
explanation why. If there's no absolute truth, then I can do whatever I want. Might makes right.
Yep. Yeah. And if there's no absolute truth, not only can you do whatever you want, no one can have an objection to anything.
No.
What would the basis be for the objection? I mean,
Right. Yeah.
that's
Absolutely.
your opinion. This is not what we were going to talk about, but you said something. I kind of just want to pick at a little bit. You said you don't want a theocracy. Uh, why is that? Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Oh gosh, I wish I had the quote pulled up, but Mark Twain. It was in I think it was it a Yankee, a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, or so, a book I read a long time ago. But there's a quote in there where uh, the character in it says something to the effect of, I didn't want an organized church because it would get too much power. And the point was that the church isn't what was bad. It was that any organization that gets too much power is going to eventually do something bad with
Sure.
it, right? Power corrupts, absolutely. And we did
Right.
see that in the church initially, in the
Before the
medieval
Reformation.
church. So, there's that. I think that ideally, the best way to look at it is that God has carved certain spheres of sovereignty. Abraham Kuyper talked about that, and um, So, it's this idea that the family is a government in and of itself and has a certain role, and husbands and wives and children all have responsibilities, and then the church has a certain role, and then there is an absolutely, God ordains a role for the state, the civil magistrate, whatever you want to call it. But I think that those things are best kept separate when you mix those roles of the church and the state, when they get into each other's stuff. It can be problematic, and I just don't think it's biblical either. We never saw Paul tell the church that they needed to go take over the government and become an official state religion.
But so because the church and state, and we could probably talk about that quite a bit. You're meaning in terms of governance, yes? Not necessarily that you mean in terms of governance. The church should not govern how the government leads or governs, right? Is that?
I don't think we should have an official state religion.
Okay.
Yeah. So like England does, for example, like Great Britain does.
Okay.
Because I was going to press and say, as a worker in the government,
should we be trying to influence the government and influence legislation and telling Christians to get out and vote 100%?
Okay.
All right.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
That's kind of what I was wondering, because I would tend to agree. I don't think that it should be a state religion, but I do think that the church or the individuals in the church should absolutely be involved in government and voting and all that kind of stuff.
We should be involved a whole lot more than we are now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would assume the reason is because God's word is our anchor, then that should lead everything, not just government, but how we run our house, how we are at work, how we treat others, everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And that's one of the problems with, I think, there's sort of this effort to secularize society, right? I know we're way away from what you call me here for tonight, but the First Amendment, it didn't. We've tried to make it something that I don't think it was. It never really said it. I mean, it didn't say that you can't take religion into account for anything you do. I mean, again, that's ridiculous. You have to. Where are you getting your truth from?
Right.
How are you going to make laws if you don't do that? And I think one of the big problems with trying to secularize society the way that a lot of state governments especially are doing, like Colorado, for example, is that they're trying to say that you can have your religion, you can have your beliefs in your church, you can have them in your home, but not in your business. We're going to tell you how to run your business. And what I don't think they understand, that as Christians, like you said, my business is God's business.
Right,
if I have
absolutely.
a business, that belongs to Him, and I have to follow my convictions there, just like I do at home. And when I use that illustration of spheres, I think that's one of those situations where the state is trying to get out of their lane and getting into the sphere of our businesses, of our families, and our churches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is devoid of truth, right? Because if those are God-given rights, and we can talk about the Constitution in terms of advocating for that, but we would just summarize by saying that those are absolute truths, in that these are God-given rights that we have. But it gets murky when it becomes relative. And I guess, would your opinion be that the reason for that just comes back to just personal ambition and desire, and wanting to feed my flesh in a sense?
Well, I mean, human beings are complicated. I mean, it could be a million things, but I think that's one of the more consistent reasons that we do that. It's very convenient to not have anybody to answer to.
Now, how do you see absolute truth as it pertains to like prosecuting And I guess maybe that's a little beyond your scope in a sense of being a chief. You know, that's law enforcement. But how do you see that playing out? Because it seems like there are situations where we look at the way that the law is applied for some individuals, and it is drastically different for them as it would be to others. And so, how is that? How is there confidence in that at all? And how does that even remotely resemble truth or absolute truth?
Well, that's really at least partially what I was referring to early on when I said that it's just so murky and messy. And at the end of the day, you just have to go, God is still sovereign in all of this, and he can still hold people accountable. The system is very flawed. We have probably one of the best systems in the world, but it's absolutely very flawed. And so here's something to wrestle with. Defense attorneys. We have what's called an adversarial system that says the prosecution throws everything that I'm speaking very generally here, but they throw everything they have at the case, and the defense attorney throws everything they do. And we believe that justice will be done through that clashing. But I mean, how do you, especially as a Christian, what if you know your client's guilty? And, like we can get up and we can say all we want about, well, I'm doing my part in the system, but can I do that? I mean, if I'm called to, seek justice and all of that, I don't know that it's a very imperfect system. And I mean, that's just, I think, something that we have to learn to live with, that at the end of the day, on this side of heaven, we're never going to see a perfect system.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But it sure makes you want to work for that, right? I mean, to not the perfect. We know we're not going to get there, but certainly being men of integrity, men who desire to seek truth and to rest on that rather than the conveniences of partial truths or flat out lies.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. And that's not something that ever is going to be achieved with just creating a certain system that works perfectly. It's like you said, it's men and women of godly character getting up every day and going to work and doing everything they can to achieve that end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wanted to go back to I think we're in your third paragraph now. There's a line I love, but I kind of also roll my eyes at. The Oxford Dictionary defined post-truth as its word of the year in 2016.
Boo.
And see, I know.
That's what the internet told me.
For the listeners, post-truth, the definition is relating to circumstances in which people respond more to feelings and beliefs than to facts. Yikes. If that's where we are, which we are as a culture, there's a lot of scenarios where we are pursuing our beliefs and wants over facts. I mean, hence the term post-truth. I don't know if you could speak to some implications to that, or man, what are some big ones that we see that?
I mean, I got some ideas.
Yeah, why don't you go? We're getting in on grounds here where people start losing their jobs for what they say. So
right,
I'll let Chris start.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Well, I mean, I think just some relatively low-hanging fruit is gender. I mean, I think that's one of those areas where, man, what is the end? I mean, where does it end? And I feel like one of the things or implications, and we've talked about it on the podcast, is just that, once you allow a toddler or a child to dictate their gender, when do we let them start choosing sexual activity, which ultimately is pedophilia, and again, I'm not trying to blow it out of proportion. I'm just simply saying that, like you say in your article about just truth being an anchor, right. We have got to be anchored in truth. Yeah. Otherwise, what is the end? And I'm not a prophet, so
right. And you're the scenario of pedophilia being accepted. It's easy to roll your eyes at and laugh now, but if you don't have an anchor of truth, 20 years from now, you can get so far off the truth that pedophilia could be accepted. And so it's easy to roll your eyes at there, or at that. An example happened today. I had to fill out some information about myself online at a college I'm attending. They wanted to honor my grades for the semester. And I was like, well, that's cool. So fill out the information at the bottom, gender, and I open it up, and the scroll menu was male, female, trans female, gender queer, and then some other type of gender, which is odd to me because the whole thing you're honoring is the grades I got based on the truth you were trying to give me. And here we are entertaining a group of facts and beliefs beliefs and wants over facts. Just in our
you had to look it all up in the Oxford Dictionary before you could fill it out.
Good grief.
So you talked about the definition being, akin to relying more on emotions than facts and stuff. And so I think a good example for that, and this is hopefully a safe example, very innocuous, but if I have a friend, or if any of us have a friend that, they lost their whoever, they lost their spouse, lost their, if one of you guys loses a parent and, however many months goes by and I see that you're very obviously depressed and you're engaging in some things that are, let's even say you're engaging in some things that are sinful to kind of deal with the pain or whatever. If I come and try and confront you and say, brother, you can't be doing this, imagine that situation where how powerful of ammunition is that when the person who is hurting can say, who has that emotion can say, well, who are you to tell me because I'm going through this pain? So it's this sort of this empathy versus sympathy argument. It's more about emotions. Emotions count more than, because that's kind of a trump card. If you get put into a corner in a philosophical argument and someone's beating you with facts, you can always pull it out and say, who are you to say, you didn't experience what I experienced?
Well, isn't that like where like intersectionality and that kind of stuff has come into politics? And I mean, and things, I mean, you look at, and again, we'll just talk about like Black Lives Matter, the movement. It seems like, that's a compromise in truth, and we could talk about the ideologies and things like that, but just simply the movement in how just destructive it has been. And yet that is completely overlooked. And maybe to the point of your example, I mean, that we validate it by years of oppression and things like that. And I'm not saying that there's zero truth in that, but does it merit the response? And why does society compromise so heavily in the understanding of truth, as a result, billions of dollars or millions at very least worth of destruction and damage?
Well, I think that it is hard to like we all, unless we're just callous. If I come to you, like I said, and be like, hey man, you've got to quit this destructive drinking habit, and you turn around and say you didn't just lose your wife like I did, unless I'm made of stone, I'm gonna naturally be like, yeah, you're right. Who am I to say that? And again, if we don't go back to, I have to be able to go back to the word and go, no, this is what it says. This is my obligation to my Christian brother to come and confront him about this destructive habit. If we can't go back to that, I mean, that is a powerful thing, that emotion and that call for empathy. And it doesn't mean that we don't take those things into account, though.
Sure.
Of course you don't, just say, hey, forget about your dead wife and get back to it. I mean, there's a certain way you handle it. You talked about the Black Lives Matter movement. You certainly saw that handled a certain way by society as a whole, in a lot of the places where riots were allowed. But, again, there are ways you can take that into account. I know in our community, it just turned out to be incredibly productive. Where the some of our local minority communities got together and talked, and I learned a lot from it. And really built some great relationships and even friendships that have persisted to this day out of it. So, I mean, it's not that we shouldn't take emotions into account and consider that. God gave us emotions too, but we can't do it at the expense of the truth.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your famous line?
Well, it's not mine,
Oh.
I can't remember who said it, but it was that we should never sacrifice truth on the altar of peace. I can't remember who wrote that.
You coined it.
No, I did not. I'm not that smart.
But we talked about church discipline. Was that a couple of weeks ago? I don't remember now. But I feel like that's in the realm of kind of where we're at now in the discussion, as far as, approaching a brother or sister with a sin or whatever it is, loss of a spouse. I mean, my goodness, anything. That maybe that reaction is different depending on how rooted we are in the word. If we can, we can't negate the emotions. I get that. That's an awful dark hour. But I don't know. Maybe there's something to be said about how rooted we are into really trying to get to the truth of any scenario. Does that kind of dictate how we, I don't know, handle a confrontation? That's the word I'm trying to think of.
Well, I think it should, right? I mean, especially if you're talking about spiritual things, ultimately getting to the truth. I mean, in your scenario, Cliff, that you presented, if a man lost his wife, I honestly, I can't imagine that agony. But let's just say it is a dear friend that I love very much, and they are engaging in sin. The truth is that just like Paul in Galatians rebuked Peter openly to his face because he stood condemned, the truth is that Peter was called by God, and Peter, we know Peter's story. He rejected Jesus, and it was reinstated, and did some amazing things for the church. So he was a vessel that God chose for a wonderful purpose. And Paul understood the reality. The truth was, if he continued down this line, he stood condemned. And so therefore, it was appropriate to go to him and rebuke him. Now, we read that, and to your point, we don't understand at all the emotional context or that connection, right? Now, back to your scenario, there would be an emotional tie, right? Like, I care for this brother, so I would present the truth. Now, absolutely, I'm not going to, quit sinning, quit being a jerk, or whatever it is. That's not going to be the approach. It is absolutely going to be in compassion. But the reality is that if he doesn't get it together, Lord willing, man, we don't know what manifests. Right. I mean, you look at, I'm sure you're familiar with Ravi Zacharias.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, the stuff that has transpired, or at least come to light since, his passing, man, that there were a lot of, I guess I'm curious, like, what those behind the scenes conversations were. I mean, was there zero accountability? Was there no truth being offered in these situations? I mean, and we don't know, but that's, the consequence of not expressing that truth is what? And again, I'm not saying that where he is or how salvation worked out. I that's beyond me. So, and thank God.
Well, and I think, the other probably two reasons that we don't see church discipline, that we're so horrendous at doing that, is, it's probably not as much a lack of truth, just as it is that, maybe the emotions are part of it. But I think the big thing is we're cowards. I think that as a whole, the church is just full of cowards in terms of that. We don't see it for what it is. It's not supposed to be judgmental. It's supposed to be, I'm walking off a cliff right now.
Right.
And I need you to grab me and yank me back and slap some sense into me.
Yeah.
Right.
But we don't see that. And I think that's kind of a blemish upon us as well, when we're so quick to kind of pat ourselves on the back because we stood up to the world and yelled at someone about their lifestyle. But will those same Christians be willing to come inside the church and call out a different sin that's going on openly in our midst?
Yeah. No,
that's
a great point.
That is a good one.
It really is.
I like the I don't know what paragraph I'm in now, but there's a chunk where you kind of apply the, you know, want your cake and to eat it too. You apply that truth to relationships. Talking about romantic relationships, they're fun, but man, if not built on a foundation of truth and moral standard, then that can lead to anything. If there is no absolute truth to the world, then perhaps the idea of a committed relationship is just some cultural construct you wrote in here. One of my favorite lines you end with is the need for that. You wrote, a sick child, dying loved one, or any number of life typical tragedies requires the rock solid strength of a loving relationship, not a free love throuple or love him and leave him sex life. I mean, just truth left, thrown out the window, affects relationships. I mean, I don't know how you couldn't see that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I just had my 10-year anniversary, and I'm sure for anyone else, it's not always been the most fun of times. There's been some lonely nights on the couch,
sure,
some angry shouting and stuff like it. And in those darkest times, though, maybe not in the darkest times, but you know, the next day, perhaps, you know, when I reflect back on those times, like what I realized, I've got to take the good with the bad. Like that's how life is sometime. And so, you know, yeah, we could have called it quits. We could have given up and left, gone our separate ways, but we wouldn't have had the good either. Like that, that's what life is. God calls us. I mean, any relationships like that, not just romantic relationships or marriages or even the ones with our kids. That's any relationship. And that's just a fact of life. Like, yeah, you can sit here and go, gosh, I wish I'd never married that person. All right. Well, what you think that through though, you know, I mean, it's like, It's a Wonderful Life or any of these sort of movies where, they always see this is what happens. You've got all your freedom now. And don't you miss your 3 kids and all the other wonderful things you didn't even think about that you were getting out of this relationship from this person that you were so anxious to be away from. There's a give and take to everything, and we always want to have our cake and eat it too.
Yeah, man, that's true. And I feel like if you look at just even in society though, like some of the statues that have been taken down, and you know, some of the, and maybe some rightly so, I don't really know, but I do. I mean, and really to your point though, those are a reflection of a time. Good, bad, and different, you know, right or wrong, it still gives us the opportunity to recall, to remember where we're coming from. You know, maybe it was the darkest time in our nation's history, and maybe we shouldn't glorify it in such a manner. And yet at the same time, by recalling that, where we once were, and looking to where we are, and then furthering where do we want to be, it seems as if that is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we spend all this time kind of trying to convince society that we should tear down person X, Y, or Z statue because they were really a bad person. And I'll go ahead and save you the trouble. You know, George Washington, sinner.
Right.
You go look through his bad note, you'll find something.
Right.
Look, I'm a huge fan, but I guarantee, and you know, the general probably would have been the first one to tell you that he was a sinner. You know, Abe Lincoln, sinner.
Right.
Name any of them.
Sure.
Name any of us.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing. We're all, and I'm not saying that some people, look, I mean, you've got your Hitlers out there that have done some things that are obviously more atrocious than others. And it's disgusting, the thought of having a statue of the guy up, unless you want to build it just so you can tear it down. But, you know, anyone that has a legacy is going to have a complicated legacy.
Yeah,
and if
absolutely.
if we think otherwise, then we're fooling ourselves about human nature.
Yeah, you're setting yourself up some major disappointment if you're following any person, really.
Now, what this might hopefully not be a complicated question, but in a society where truth is determined or dictated, shifted, maybe for personal prosperity or even just a power, to maintain power. If we live in a society, and I think you write about this a little bit, but if we live in a society where truth is relative or is determined, what is our responsibility as truth seekers then?
I mean, I think you've got to speak up. I told you a little bit. So here's the thing. I've sat in a lot of city council meetings over the last decade, right? A ton of them. What I've wrestled with is if I'm sitting in the crowd and someone is up there and they're telling the lawfully elected council, and by extension, they're telling the citizens something that I know is a lie while I'm sitting in the crowd, am I on the hook or not? Because I know, but it's not me saying it. And I don't know. I don't know the answer. You could argue about appropriate roles and stuff like that, and that comes into play. But I do think by and large, like we have an obligation to speak the truth. And when I was in high school, I really had this sort of view that, I didn't need to speak up in class or argue about something. And my thought was God can defend himself. He doesn't need Cliff. And he can. That's all very true. But I think what I never took into consideration was the idea that, what about the other people and the other 30 students in that class that were hearing something that was false? They needed to hear the truth. It wasn't because God needed me to defend his glory, but they're all being led astray. So what obligation do we have to speak up and tell the truth?
You were talking about speaking out and things like that. So I guess what is your take on like censorship and things like that? And are you into like a lot of like the congressional hearings and things like that? I mean,
I haven't kept up with a whole lot lately. But censorship, freedom of speech, any of it's so easy for us to sit here and talk about, oh, we're absolutely against it. But like the reality is that, so like you can't go and yell fire in a crowded theater is kind of the classic example about how freedom of speech is not absolute. And, I mean, geez, I think we can all agree with that. I don't want terrorists organizing on social media platforms, so we can all agree with that. But then that's the problem is then, like we've all seen where that can go, where it's I don't like what you're saying, so
right.
As far as I'm concerned, this is pretty much the same as terrorists. Therefore, you're banned.
Right.
So that's the problem with it. It's not necessarily an absolute line, but it's a tension we have to live in. But I definitely err more towards the side of let's err on the side of freedom of speech. Let's err on the side of not censoring things and let's trust people to be able to. It's just like a lot of there've been several really high profile events over the last couple of years that when they went to trial, I was just really upset with the media that and some of the stuff when all the facts came out, it didn't necessarily change my opinion on the outcome. I still wanted someone to go to jail or whatever, but it's like, let me make my own decision.
Right.
Give us the facts and let me make my own decision.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. Yeah. And I mean, even going, you mentioned a trial like the Rittenhouse trial. Derek Chauvin, I think, was another one that was high profile. And I don't know that I would say that the media coverage was quite as biased in that one, although I would say maybe biased, but rather than presenting the facts. But like the Rittenhouse trial, there was a lot of
Yeah.
like just false things
Blatant
in the
lies.
media, blatant lies in the media, and so it does make it interesting when it comes to that the press. So because really, and what we're talking about is this desire to get to the bottom, to rest in truth, right? I mean that's it in a nutshell. And so I guess I wish I knew the answer to, how do we get people to desire that more than anything is truth, because once it becomes relative, it seems like it's of no value or little value.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, I think we as citizens bear some of that responsibility too, because so like let's say for example, Facebook says, well, we're taking some of this off because it's false information, and we can wave our fist and say, oh, they're just censoring me. But like, let's be honest, there's absolutely like ridiculous stuff that's going around on Facebook that a lot of people believe.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
now I'm not saying that that's the right way to handle it. I'm not saying that's the solution, but what I'm saying is that it is a problem. So we need to all be smart enough in society to educate ourselves, to check that stuff out, to not believe some stupid, outrageous thing because we read it on the internet. We all have an obligation on that side of it too. But just censoring it is not the way. That's always going to go bad.
That actually kind of makes me want to go back to kind of at the beginning of your article. There was a line, absent some moral training on the importance of truth, the child in question will likely take the path of least resistance. So I just wanted to kind of focus on that. Absent of moral training on the importance of truth. I mean, maybe that's where we're at as a society, is that truth for the majority just doesn't have any value. I mean, there's no importance put on it anymore.
Yeah. And this is probably, again, an entirely different discussion, but when you look at Israel in the Old Testament, they were it's always viewed as like a nation as a whole, right? There's individuals they talk about, but there's this sort of hills and valleys that they go through and in their relationship with God. And I guess what I'm getting at is there is absolutely a relationship between the following God's laws and precepts, even just in and of itself, even if there isn't like a genuine relationship with God. So you hear people argue about, oh, well, the founders weren't really Christian. That's kind of a thing in contemporary history now. Let's go back and pick that apart. They really weren't all Christians, and that was all a lot. Okay, even if it was, even if they didn't have individual relationships with God, these guys all grew up in a society that had those precepts surrounding them, and that's that was where this Constitution and all our country was birthed out of. And there's a benefit to that. Like if he set things up, he designed this whole thing, and then he said, here's the user's manual. That's how you want to run this thing. If you follow it, it's probably going to work better than if you just kind of wing it and do like I do if I buy something in IKEA and just end up with the thing all messed up and parts left over and stuff collapsing on the kids in the bedroom.
Yikes. Yeah, that's not a society I want to be a part of.
But do you think that I mean, and we've already answered this somewhat, but do you think that we compromise truth because we don't want conflict, or we just want to just get along with everyone? And is that out of personal ambition, or maybe that's just it's sort of that's this moral superiority or not superiority, maybe that's the wrong way to put it, but just this moral understanding of, if I can just get along with everyone, you can have your truth and I can have my truth. The problem is that there are truths, regardless if it's absolute or not, that trump others because of going back to like intersectionality, right? Like you talked about how, well, you don't understand my pain. So that truth trumps other truths, right? I mean, and I think where we've seen that is, the assault on law enforcement. And I've talked to some local officers and that about that and about the morale within law enforcement because they have been so attacked. I guess I don't know that I have a question in that, but I guess maybe what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's been a rough couple of years. Off the top of my head, I think there's something 19,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States. I want to say 8 or 900,000 actual law enforcement officers, something in that neighborhood. Absolutely, there's some people that are. I mean, it's just statistics. It's odds. There's going to be some people that are there for the wrong reasons.
Right.
There's going to be people that, there's probably a handful of racists out of that nearly 1 million people. Statistically speaking, any group of people, there's going to be, and we need to do stuff. We need to deal with those things. We need to actively identify those problems and deal with them. But, if you're one of the other 98% or whatever cop and you're just out there doing the best you can and working horrible shifts and all this stuff because in your own mind you honestly believe in the cause and you really want to help people, and then someone stopping you in the line at McDonald's harassing you, it's a very demoralizing thing, I think. So again, it comes back to truth. The Bible lays out a lot for us to learn about justice and how we decide things, and not just in court but in our lives. And I think if people would apply those same things to these situations they see in the news, things like due process and needing witnesses and stuff like that, then we'd probably be a lot better off. But a lot of that, it's not about right and wrong. It's not about truth. It's about politics. And, politics is not about drilling down the details of something and deciding who did something right or something wrong. It's about, I have to create a sweeping narrative and swoop as many votes under that side as I can. And there's just a lot of times truth is just too inconvenient to deal with for that. And that's what happens. You're dealing with massive movements and stuff. And unfortunately, when forces like that get at play, individuals a lot of times really get hurt.
Kind of a hard one to answer because you can't tell future events. But in your opinion, where do you see truth for us as a country? I mean, 10 years from now, is it going to get further away, or do you see us getting back to it?
I don't know, man. I don't know where I see the country in 10 years. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I never would have thought we'd see kind of some of the stuff we see now. I just think a lot of it, it depends on how the church responds. I think that what we're going to see is sort of a sifting of the church. We've already had kind of a lot of, I think attendance with the pandemic stuff. A lot of people stopped coming and never came back. You're going to continue to see as it becomes less and less of a social obligation to go as society doesn't expect it. I think you're going to see people that are there for the right reasons. They're there because they want to be, because they know they're called to be. And is that going to create a stronger church that's going to have a resurgence? I don't know. But if anybody's going to speak the truth, that's who it's going to have to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amen.
Absolutely.
I do like that. I never thought of that numbers dropped and then didn't come back. So maybe in a way it has been purified or sifted, as you said. So therefore we could have a strong resurgence. I hadn't thought about that. I hope you're right. That'd be awesome to see. We need it.
Gosh, I hope so. I going back to the marriage on your, it's towards the end of your article. You wrote about, and I feel like if we're being honest, this is the real deal. But you wrote about truth, and it's a silent thing. Our silence at work may allow a company to avoid dealing with wrongs it has committed, but it doesn't eliminate the consequences. Someone somewhere suffers for our silence, and this is what I think is, I got a chuckle out of it. Our instance to our I think I'm reading that right. Our instance to our significant other that their outfit looks great on them might ensure that the tone of our evening out isn't ruined, but our white lie doesn't do them any real favors. Not really when we go out in public. Man, I'm terrible at reading aloud, and I do apologize for that because the article is much better than my ability to read out loud. Now, I'm not going to ask you because, there's probably some like unwritten man code. If that's not like a legit situation that you have encountered, I'm sure you've heard about it from some friends. But so what does a guy do in a situation like that?
I'm horrible about, I don't know, maybe I should master the art of the white lie, but I've just never felt if you don't want an honest opinion on how the outfit looks, then don't ask me.
Is that
Is that right? I lean to that side because if you're going to ask a question, well, a question assumes truth, so I'm going to tell you. Now, do I fail at my tactic? Yeah, I could do it better. I get that.
Yeah.
Hey, how does this dress look on me? Maybe the answer is just, I love you. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think that maybe it's a somewhat innocuous example, but really, if someone says, "Does this make me look horrible?" and you say, "No, you look great," and then they how selfish is that, right? Because what you've done is you've just protected yourself because you didn't want to get chewed up.
Sure.
But you've they obviously, I mean, I assume you asked me how you looked. I assume you care how you looked, and I just sent you out looking horrible and didn't tell you.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's what we do a lot of times when we just we're being, not just for that particular situation,
sure.
But I mean, sometimes, because think about it. I mean, it could be much more serious stuff. Friends ask, about, hey, I've got and it may be something very serious. I've got this relationship with my family and my mom and dad, and I need to do, and you don't want to have that hard conversation with them and tell them that, and give them honest advice. And so they, whatever, I mean, it could be serious consequences in their life, and all because we wanted to be selfish and not, face the inconvenience or the hurt feelings.
Yeah. No,
that's selfish.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, and I would throw it back on the person asking the question, because if you were only asking the question so that I would, boost your ego, then you weren't being truthful from the outset for even asking the question. So I think I'm going to throw back on the question asker. I mean, if you want,
and probably some vanity. I really hope that there's no women that watch this podcast that are going to.
Well, there might be two.
Not anymore, yeah.
But I mean, look, it looks different on the different sexes. Sometimes those different attitude. We've all got our little things that we do, but I mean, ultimately, that's the problem with it. You got to really drill down into the logic of it, drill down into the reason of it. And a lot of times, if we're answering and giving the quote unquote safe answer, then we're really just being selfish.
Yeah.
Looking out for number one.
That's good. Yeah. Now, did you have any other questions?
I mean, not really. When we end it, I kind of wanted to read the full last paragraph because I really love it a lot.
Okay, well, is there anything else as it even? I mean, anything else, and certainly as it pertains to the article, or just any thoughts as far as truth that you would want to share? We just give you the mic here.
No, I think I wrote it all down. I just appreciate you guys letting me come on.
Yeah, no, we appreciate your willingness to.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
So, you want to?
Okay, yeah, Cliff. To wrap it up, and again, we'll share the full article. But my goodness, I love the closing statement. No, silence in the face of difficulty doesn't alter the truth of a situation. It may keep things more comfortable for us as an individual, but it doesn't change reality. Such silence is as much as a transgression as the lie itself, and the consequences are far reaching. A society that loses its appreciation for the concept of absolute truth is doomed. Like the ship with no navigation point, it is cursed to wander aimlessly. Its voluntary naivety may bring comfort for a time, but it will eventually find itself dashed upon the rocks of the very consequences that the truth would have warned of.
Yeah, that's
amen and amen.
I'm glad you read that aloud too, man.
I don't know, man. Truth is, you could say it's everything. Because any discussion you're going to have with anyone, believer or non-believer, assumes truth. Any claim you make assumes truth, even if the claim is there's no truth. Well, that's a truth statement. We've talked about that. It's self-defeating.
If we can't agree that there's an absolute truth, then there's like, I don't see what the point in. You can't have a debate after that,
right? Yeah. I don't know, and so I love truth, man. It's a concept, a topic I love talking about. I thank God for truth. Because of it, we get tools like knowledge. We can have knowledge. We can use reason, logic. Just wonderful things. And it's just, it frustrates me to see a culture go, yeah, we don't want any of that. Which our standard is our flesh. That's good enough.
Boo.
Yeah, boo.
Sounds terrible.
So
before we let you go, I do want to ask you one question, and I did not let you know this, but as a man, what characteristics, whether that be that you value most or that you see the most need for in our society, do you think that every man should have or work to cultivate? I mean, and you can give one or three or whatever you want to do there. And I know I'm putting you on the spot, but this is something that we've started to do as far as asking some of the guests, because I think it's important as men to sharpen one another. And there are characteristics that we all have. I mean, last week, I think Joseph, he read the gifts of the Spirit, and he talked about like self-control. And I never thought about that in the way that he presented it. And so, I don't know that obviously we're not Jesus, so we're not going to be perfect men. However, I do think that we should absolutely be desiring to do better and better. So if you had to sort of throw out one or whatever the chief characteristic might be, what would that look like to you?
I don't know that it would necessarily be the most important one. But just off the top of my head, I think I would have to say courage. One of the things that's really just shocked me lately is just looking around and seeing just how fearful men are to stand up about things. It's like, what are you afraid you're going to lose? You may lose your job, may lose your, what about your legacy? So I would have to say courage. I think the best definition I've ever heard of that was John Wayne said it's being scared to death and saddling up anyway.
Yeah. That's good stuff.
It's not an absence of fear. It's going ahead and acting anyway. And as Christians, it's because we know the ultimate truth. It's because we know that regardless of what happens, that God is still in control. He's still sovereign in that situation, and that he's going to work it all to his glory and our good usually too.
Absolutely. Well, and so do you think that courage, is certainly not devoid of faith then, right?
Oh no, it's I think it's if anything, it's sort of an outgrowth of faith.
Okay. Right on. Well,
yeah,
that's all I had, man. So
you
heard it first from Cliff.
There you go. Put it on a t-shirt. All right, Cliff, we're gonna wrap it up, man. Again, thank you so much for coming on and straightening us out. We were a little unsure of truth, if it was real or not.
No, man, we hope you had a good time. I'm sure the listeners will appreciate it.
Time.
And like we said, we'll put it we'll link the gosh darn it, the article. I'm sorry. Yeah. How might people get a hold of you or find more of your content? Because you have your own website, yes, where you're putting up blog posts and that?
Yeah, I've got a Facebook page, a Twitter account. It's at Clifton D. Couch, and then the blog that the article is on is www.lifeofalawman.com.
Okay, very good.
And that's where I put all my stuff when I write it.
Yeah, it's good.
Cool.
So yeah, look him up, folks. You will enjoy it. You will not be disappointed.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, Cliff, it'd be nice. I'll go ahead and speak for Chris if we can have you on again sometime in the future.
Yeah, that would be cool if you'd be willing.
Yeah, love to.
Okay, great.
You could talk about anything. We don't have to just talk about truth. We could have you on again and
Talk about lies.
yeah, we got to do the flip side. So,
Well, he already told us he's not a good liar. So
oh yeah.
maybe we won't engage you on that.
Okay. Well, we're gonna wrap it up, brothers and sisters. Be sure to check his stuff out. Truth does matter. Again, if it doesn't, you're wandering aimless, and it's a pretty absurd life I would not want to be a part of. So, once again, this has been another episode of True Discussion. We're going to get out of here. God bless.
God bless.
Hey there, Joseph Dobbs here from True Discussion.
Hey, Chris Douglas.
Look, we wanted to take a second and just say thanks for either watching or listening to our content.
But mostly watching because it's YouTube. And we wanted to just ask that you would take a moment and leave us a thumbs up, that you would subscribe and of course share.
Yeah,
because you
like it
people
and share it and subscribe. We want you to do all those things now. Sorry, but
yeah, now.
But yeah,
what are you
please.
waiting on?
seriously.